In this lecture, students, we're going to be defining the rule of law, and this is a continuation of our discussions of terms and terminologies that are important in the legal sense and also important in terms of proper governance. And so today we're looking at the rule of law. We want to understand what it means and its application in civil society. All right, so we begin with a definition of a rule of law, and this definition is paramount if we are to really understand and apply rule of law in the true sense of the concept. Rule of law is simply the rule of law. Now, let's take a closer look at this. The restriction, it says here, of the arbitrary, right? So, a few things happening here, students. Restriction, we all know what that means. When you restrict, you limit. When you restrict, you put a lead on something, whatever that is. In this case, we're talking about power, right? So the restriction of the arbitrary exercise. Arbitrary is a key word here. And it's important for us to understand what it means within this context. So let's take a look at this closely. The restriction of the arbitrary exercise of power. Arbitrary is knee-jerk. Arbitrary is ad hoc. Arbitrary is no logic. That's what it means, right? So doing things without reason, doing things without any sense, doing things without any logic, doing things without any trend or any type of process that makes sense. That's what arbitrary means, right? Arbitrary exercise of power. So the restriction of the arbitrary exercise of power by subordinating that power, we are talking about whoever has power, it could be the president, it could be the parliament, it could be the judiciary, but restricting the arbitrary use of that power. Once again, we'll come back to this word arbitrary because if you understand this word, you understand rule of law, right? So arbitrary, again, in this context, no logic, knee-jerk, ad hoc, doesn't make sense. There is no pattern to it. It just came from nowhere, so to speak, right? Using power in that context, that power then is subjected, subordinating, right? As subjected, right, to well-defined and established laws. So laws that have been through the process, laws that have been through the process of lawmaking, which is through the legislature, in most cases, through the legislature, going through the process of vetting, going through the process of research, going through the process of understanding the application and the impact of the application, and testing, ensuring that there is a clear understanding of the impact of that law. When laws are passed, they go through those processes within the parliamentary system. So well-defined and established laws. The laws are defined and established as well. It's important for us to understand this definition of rule of law. Let's take this again one more time, students. The restriction of the arbitrary exercise of power by subjecting that power to well-defined and established laws. So the power has to operate within the confines, right? Within the confines of law. Please take note of this, students. Any power that is held by politicians, any power in an office of the land must be in compliance with established laws, with well-defined and established laws. This is very critical, and this is very important when we talk about civil society, and we're talking about the application of law, and we're talking about the supremacy of law. All powers must be subjected to law, and those powers must be exercised within the limits and within the frame of those well-defined and established laws, right? And that's what this is addressing. The restriction of the arbitrary use of power or exercise of power by subordinating or subjecting that power to well-defined and established laws. Now, let's take a look at this a bit closely and begin to see what that means in society, especially in civil society, in democratic societies. It says here, the essence of the rule of law is that, right? Essence means the importance. Essence here means the purpose and the objective and the key overarching need. The essence of the rule of law is that all people, right, students? It didn't say some people. It didn't say half of the people. It didn't say 90% of the people. It didn't say 10% of the people. It says all people and institutions within a political body are subject to the same law. Taking a look at this a bit closely, it says here, it's important for us to understand here that we are talking about same set of laws, right? And that's why the word here is same laws, not subjected to laws, but the same law that's applicable in that society, right? That's what this is referring to. So the essence of the rule of law is that all people and institutions within a political body are subject to the same law. So it doesn't matter who you are in this context. It doesn't matter the office you hold. It doesn't matter your position. It doesn't matter your parentage. It doesn't matter your economic status, your political status, your religious status, your military status. None of those matter when we talk about the rule of law, because the rule of law is supreme and all powers must be subjected to that rule of law because of the supremacy of the law. The essence of rule of law is that all people and institutions within a political body are subject to the same laws. This concept is sometimes stated simply as no one is above the law. All of you have heard of this term, no one is above the law. And it means exactly that. The president, who is the highest officer in that political body, to the lowest person, is not above the law. No one is above the law. And that's what this means. Conversely, then, all are equal before the law. So all citizens of that country or citizens of that land within the political body are equal before the law. In theory, again, in application, that may be different. Other things may come to bear. There could be racial factors. There could be issues of ethnicity, issues of religion, and political perspectives and views and beliefs and so forth. But in paper and in theory, all are equal before the law. That means if the president commits a crime, well, then that president will be liable. Now, there's something called immunity, right? So presidential immunity is there. And when immunity expires, sometimes they can go after the president. But nevertheless, the president is subject to the same law as the least powerful person in that political body. That is the rule of law. We'll talk about rule of law in the context of democratic society and the practice of democracy and ensuring that the law reigns supreme. That's what it means. All are equal before the law. Now, why is this important? Why is the rule of law important? It's important for a number of reasons. One, we have to ensure that there is civility in society, right? There is civility in society, right? So no lawlessness. You can imagine a society where there's no rule of law. Then you have anarchy. You have anything goes. We have the breaking of laws with no repercussions and the total breakdown of rule of law, and everybody does what they want. So the rule of law is in place to prevent lawlessness, to ensure civility, to ensure rights of citizens, and that includes human rights, includes other rights, to ensure freedom, and to ensure that everybody has an opportunity to defend themselves before a lawfully constituted court of law. So the rule of law simply says that all persons within a political body are subject to the same law. Now, let's take a look at this one more time before we move on to the other definitions. The restriction of the arbitrary exercise by subordinating it to well-defined and established laws. And then it says the essence of the rule of law is that all people and institutions within a political body are subject to the same law. Now, this is very important once again, to the same law, not different laws, not one set of laws for the lower class and another set of laws for the middle class, another set of laws for the upper class. No, to the same law. And that is key, fundamental in our understanding of the rule of law. And this is sometimes known as nobody's above the law. It doesn't matter who you are, you cannot be above the law. In a society where some are above the law, there is anarchy. Let's put that here. There is anarchy, there is chaos, there's chaos, right? And there's lawlessness. And in a society where all of these are present, well, then lives are not protected, properties are not protected, the rich get their way, and the poor, the masses, and the ones that suffer. So, this is the rule of law as defined and as applied in civil society.